It's not that I can't afford a new motorcycle, but second-hand bikes offer better value. The guy purchased a 2010 Kawasaki ZX6R from a junkyard for just $1,300 as scrap metal. After securing it on the trailer hitch, he could begin his journey home. It was already late night when he returned to the workshop. Brown immediately moved it into the garage. As you can see, the entire front end of this Kawasaki ZX6R was almost completely destroyed. The details of the bike's condition reveal how severe the accident must have been. At first glance, almost 80% of the bike's parts were damaged. To understand the bike's overall condition, Brown pushed it outside, preparing to give the entire bike a thorough inspection. After careful cleaning by the mechanic, all the dirt on the body was thoroughly washed away. Now, you can see obvious scratch marks on the swing arm. The bottom fairing was completely missing. The gear shifter was bent from impact, and the cooling system didn't look promising either. Also, there was minimal clearance between the front wheel exhaust. The mechanic couldn't immediately identify the issue. He'd have to figure it out later. The coolant reservoir on the other side had been torn apart in the accident. The front air intake was even worse, completely beyond salvaging. Next was inspecting the side covers, revealing a huge crack in one of them. Also damaged were the main and passenger seats on the subframe and exhaust system. The mechanic also discovered a serious problem. The bike was almost completely out of oil. These inspection results gave the mechanic quite a headache, because he had no idea how long the previous owner had been riding without engine oil. He didn't want to give up on the original fuel tank, though restoring it would be an extremely big challenge. But the immediate priority was determining if the engine on the frame could still start. For safety reasons, he needed to remove the engine side cover first. Just as he was about to begin disassembly, he discovered a huge crack in the frame. For the mechanic, this was undoubtedly another heavy blow, but he continued the disassembly without hesitation, quickly removing the damaged side cover. This confirmed that disassembly for inspection was absolutely the right choice. Inside, he found small metal fragments, which immediately raised his concerns. He quickly drained the remaining oil to remove any metal debris from inside. While the oil was draining, he began disassembling the exhaust system and the radiator under the front. It's important to note to avoid damaging wiring harnesses and tubes during this process. After removing the radiator, it was obvious that it had been completely destroyed in the accident. After removing these components, he could remove the oil pan. This would help determine if there were more metal fragments inside. At this point, some foreign objects were visible in the oil pan. The mechanic thoroughly cleaned the inside before reinstalling it on the engine. He also replaced the fuel filter while at it. Since he didn't have a replacement side cover yet, he had to make do with the damaged one for now. After installing these parts back on the bike, he could add fresh engine oil. Next, he removed the damaged ignition system and tried to start it by directly connecting the wires. After connecting the dashboard, he could attempt to start it. The engine on the frame was impressively responsive, starting up immediately for the first try. After confirming the engine ran normally, the mechanic finally felt relieved. Due to the loud noise, Brown had to reinstall the exhaust he had removed earlier before trying to run it again. As he applied throttle, the exhaust emitted a deep roaring sound. You can now see the mechanic smiling from ear to ear. After all, finding a Kawasaki with such a healthy engine for just $1,300 was an absolute steal. Now, he could proceed with disassembly to determine which parts needed replacement on the frame. Just the subframe alone yielded a pile of parts when disassembled. Next came removing the fuel tank. Fortunately, the airbox inside wasn't affected by the accident and remained perfectly intact. This would save the mechanic a significant investment. Next was preparing the bike's wiring harness in preparation for removing the engine. The original chain was severely rusted and no longer usable. After completing these preparatory steps, he could begin removing the engine by removing the mounting bolts. The engine was disconnected from the frame. The mechanic used his two strong arms to lift the entire frame off. At this point, the Kawasaki ZX6R was completely disassembled. Early the next morning, he drove his car to the garage entrance, then secured the Kawasaki ZX6R frame to the trailer to take it to a friend's shop for help welding the broken frame. Before welding, the broken area needed to be sanded clean in preparation for the welding work. After sanding out the paint from the surface, The broken sections can be welded back together. To speed up the process, immediately after welding, he hurriedly brought it back to his workshop. The welding appeared extremely solid. Now, he just needed to grind the weld points smooth. This step was relatively simple. After grinding it smooth, he immediately applied body filler. While waiting for it to cure, he could start sanding the frame. Since the frame had minor scratches from the accident, it would need repainting later. Meanwhile, he repaired some dented areas, such as the swing arm and other large parts. Due to the swing arm's unique nature, it was difficult to repair, so he had to sand it down and fill it with body filler. The repair method was similar to the frame, so I won't explain it in detail. After completing the frame repairs, he gave the frame a quick wash, then applied primer. Before applying the final paint, areas that didn't need painting were protected with newspaper. After completing these protective measures, he could begin applying the paint. As he repeatedly applied the paint, the frame was visibly transforming. At a remarkable rate, he applied 3 coats of paint in total. Now, who could imagine? This was once a crashed bike frame. His impressive skills deserve admiration. The next task was cleaning the dirt from the engine's surface. The original spark plugs were all replaced. Then the engine could be reunited with a disassembled frame. The installation process was similar to disassembly, so I won't go into details. Additionally, the pre-ordered side covers had arrived and were installed as well. Next was preparing the exhaust pipes, mainly cleaning the surface dirt. After treatment, the exhaust system looked brand new. Now it just needed to be installed on the frame. A batch of tubes and wiring harnesses had also arrived, along with a brand new radiator, so the immediate priority was installing these newly arrived parts. The original radiator fan that was still usable was transplanted to the new radiator, making good use of salvageable parts. After installing the radiator came the coolant hose installation. Also, the old deteriorated hoses from the engine were discarded. The new hoses provided a substantial visual improvement as well. The rear mud guard and other parts were also installed. Then he began removing the front sprocket. This revealed that the front sprocket could still be used as is, but for a better riding experience later on, he decided to replace the sprocket type to achieve better acceleration performance. After completing the front sprocket replacement, replacing the rear sprocket was also essential, so it was also great. Additionally, as mentioned earlier, the original chain was severely rusted, so he ordered a new chain set. Now, he just needed to adjust it to the proper length. At this point, the bike's drivetrain was temporarily complete. The foot pegs and shift lever now being installed were salvage parts the mechanic had found. He didn't forget the scattered wiring on the frame either, organizing everything thoroughly. The only thing still bothering him was the clearance between the front wheel and exhaust. They were too close together. To identify the problem, he tried adjusting the suspension height. However, the results weren't very promising. The distance between the wheel and exhaust barely changed. Unable to find a solution, Brown found a different front suspension in his workshop, hoping to find a breakthrough by replacing it. However, the final result was the same, with no change in the clearance between them. Additionally, he learned online that the Kawasaki ZX6R came from the factory with this setup, which finally put his mind at ease. So, he removed the test suspension and reinstalled the original front suspension. This single issue had consumed nearly a week of his time. With this problem solved, he could continue with the rest of the repair. He acquired some engine protection accessories, designed to prevent engine damage in case of a crash. Additionally, the original airbox wasn't damaged in the accident, so it just needed a simple cleaning before being reinstalled. Here, the only replacement was the internal air filter, completing another repair task. Next came the most difficult part, fuel tank restoration. Before repairs, he needed to ensure no fuel remained inside and work in a well-ventilated environment. Here, he first sanded the rusted areas before beginning to repair the dented portions. This was undoubtedly the most time-consuming process. After working half a day, he hadn't made substantial progress. Finally, with no other options, he designed a pressurized air inlet, hoping to use air pressure to repair the dented areas. This technique actually proved effective. which immediately brought a smile to his face. After completing the fuel tank repair, he received another package containing a set of clutch and throttle grips, giving him a new direction for progress, which he easily installed. Another package contained an air intake, a used part he had sourced, which he installed on the frame. The new exhaust he ordered in also arrived. He needed to remove the foot pegs to create space for the exhaust installation. After securing the exhaust, he reinstalled the foot pegs. In the following period, the workshop received a used headlight. To find this particular headlight, the mechanic had gone to considerable trouble. The final major component had also arrived, a set of red fairings in the box. According to him, he bought these from another rider. They showed hardly any signs of use, but due to their age, the paint had lost some of its shine. Before installing the fairings, he rebuilt the brake lines throughout the bike. Then he could assemble the fairings. To facilitate installation, he pre-assembled the fairings together. Then he just needed to fit them piece by piece like a puzzle. After installing all the fairings that could be fitted at this stage, he shifted his focus back to the fuel tank. It appeared the tank had been cut and then rewelded as part of the repair. Now his task was to sand the paint off the surface, then apply body filler for repairs. Since he's explained the painting process many times, I won't go into detail again, but before painting the fuel tank, it needed testing. The testing method was very simple. Just fill the tank with fuel, then start the engine to check for any fuel leaks. Fortunately, no issues were found. Next, he could remove the fuel tank again to apply primer. The final color choice was puzzling. I'm not sure about his aesthetic taste, as he painted the fuel tank black. While waiting for the paint to dry, he didn't waste a moment and began installing the windscreen and side mirrors. Finally came the fuel tank installation, with the seat installed. This 2010 Kawasaki ZX6R purchased for $1,300 as a crash bike was completely restored. He immediately filled the fuel tank and took it to the courtyard. However, due to heavy snowfall outside, it wasn't suitable for road testing, so he could only give a static demonstration at the end of the video. Let's experience the roar of this Kawasaki ZX6R. The only criticism about the bike is the fuel tank, but since everyone's aesthetic sense differs, it's not fair to judge harshly. So friends, are you satisfied with this transformation? Let's meet in the comments section.